I hate to ruin all those wonderful conversations you were having. Um, but yeah, again, thanks everyone for coming. My name's Antar Tichavakunda. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Southern California, and I'm really excited to be here and to be moderating this panel. Before I get into this, really quickly, I just can't impress upon you all the importance, I think, at least just meeting new people here. I mean, conferences, that's what they're for, right? So I think if you can walk away at least a couple of connections, and this was time well spent. But enough of me chatting. I want to get into the panelists who you all came to see. So right now we're going to be talking about digital equity and ways that this group of four, kind of how they think about digital equity in relation to college access and learning in general. So I guess really quickly, about 2 minutes each, could each of you all say your name? If you picked a role outside, kind of like if you pick like digital innovator, what role did you pick? And how does your position and what you do relate to technology and college access or learning?
I'll get started. My name is Cecilia Rios Aguilar. I'm an associate professor at UCLA's Grad School of Education and Information Studies. And before I say my role, I guess, in technology, I want to thank Zoe and the Pullias Center, because you guys have always listened to our research and attempt to collaborate, which I find extremely useful. We have been in several sessions and intersected, and we've always kept in conversation, so I really appreciate that. And I got the opportunity a while ago to do the first study that studied the potential of an app. It was called at that time the Schools app, to examine the potential of that in helping community college students persist and succeed at higher rates. Since that study, we learned a lot. Charles was part of that effort when he was a grad student, when I was at the University of Arizona. We learned a ton about technology, not just related to college access, but persistence and success. We were able to also interact with that group of the hackathon, the winners. We were brought as the researchers who give them some perspective into our research agenda is on marginalized students, college access, persistence, and success. So Regina, my colleague, and I were brought as the research eyes. And currently, we're working on a different take on technology, which is about using text messages to try to help students navigate the financial aid process. My take really on technology is that I do believe it has a role in students' persistence, access, persistence, and success, but we have to be very critical about how we think about technology, how it intersects with students and families and communities' lives. That's where I'm going to stop.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Solomon Russell. I'm an assistant professor at El Camino College. Before that, I worked at UCLA School of Education for the Exploring Computer Science program. That was a program that was started maybe about 10 years ago when they found that a lot of schools didn't have access to computer science education. There were a lot of computers in classrooms in some schools, but the curriculum and the teacher training wasn't there to actually ensure access to everyone. I've also worked with Level Playing Field Institute and out of Oakland, California. I just got appointed by the governor to the Computer Science Strategic Panel for implementing computer science. Thank you, in January. So over the next few months, we're coming up with a plan so that all schools, rural, urban, suburban, all have access to computer science. So that's really the lens through which I look at technology as computer science.
Thank you, Solomon. Can you tell them where you're from really quickly?
Oh, yes. I'm from Washington, D.C.
Yeah, we actually went to the same high school. So
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks, Solomon.
Good morning. My name is Charles Davis. I am an assistant professor at the Rossier School of Education, and I also serve as the Chief Strategy and Research Officer for the USC Race and Equity Center. My foray into digital technology actually began in advertising, where I served as a digital strategist for an advertising firm on Madison Avenue. And then that segued into my time at the University of Arizona, where I met Cecilia and Regina and had the opportunity to work on our project there. And so that was the first, I guess, legitimate research experience of taking all that I had from a practitioner space and being able to apply that in a post-secondary environment. But for me, in my own line of research, studying activism and social movements, I'm really interested in how digital technology is a tool for social change and how students are engaging in that process. And I think that has a lot of implications for digital access, to be sure. And so I'm very excited to be in conversation with the other folks here who bring a wealth of knowledge, and hopefully I can add something of value to that conversation as well. I picked Digital Warrior for my sticker, and I think part of that is just my interpretation of how I use and tend to use social media as a weapon.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Okay, we are awake. My name is Oscar Menjivar. I'm the CEO and founder of TXT, Teens Exploring Technology. Just in a nutshell, what we do is we encourage young Black and Latino boys to become technology entrepreneurs. So we take them through the process of design thinking, of business canvas modeling. We take them through the process of collecting data and researching data, specifically in low-income communities, collecting that data, analyzing that data, and understanding the data in order to build products. As Zoe mentioned before, there's many companies for profit out there that will collect data, or not even collect data. A lot of times they would just create a product without actually knowing their audience, and they tell us that go and use it because it's going to work for low-income students. Beware of those. So our students go ahead and collect that data, they analyze the situation, they analyze this data, and they create these products in about 10 weeks. They create what we call MVP, which is a minimal viable product. And then they pitch to investors. So we've had investors from A16Z come over from Silicon Valley and visit us. Atom Factory, if you know the Atom Factory down the street from here. We've had all those investors come in and analyze the products that our kids are doing. And the kids get a chance to pitch, and then at the end of this summer intensive academy that happens at USC with the Dr. Dre Academy, better known as IOV and Young Academy, the kids get $4,000, and then they go ahead throughout the year and launch their own products. So currently, we have a product that is an artificial intelligence robot. So it's that may be used in your schools one day, which what it does is, as soon as the kid comes into your classroom and the robot listens to the voice, it says that student's inside the classroom, inside the school, and sends a text to your parents and says, hey, little Jimmy just went into the classroom. It's very awesome, created by kids. I chose Digital Warrior for this because just yesterday I was talking to one of my former students, now he's 26 years old, and he was telling me the story that he remembers, which is when he was in high school and we were teaching them 10 years ago how to code and create websites, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. 10 years ago, at that school, the principal didn't know that we were actually teaching them how to code, because it was my job to teach them how to use PowerPoint and how to type. And so I taught the students how to use fast, quick keys effects in order for them to put the PowerPoint on the one screen and then the coding template on the other screen. And when the principal came in, he switched it over and look, we're doing PowerPoints. And I actually didn't remember that until yesterday when he was talking to me last night. He said, that's why you're breaking rules at schools. And I said, I was. But that's why I chose Digital Warrior, because I think that a lot of times in the digital age, we have to break rules at the schools. We have to push the boundaries. We can't follow the trends, especially to help young minorities, Black and brown students in low-income communities, and especially if you're working with young men of color, and I mean Blacks and Latinos. You can't just follow the trends of what's happening right now and expect for them to move up the ladder and expect them to be successful, whether you're using online tools or not. For us, it's a tool that we use for upward mobility, right? For building wealth and understanding that we teach computer science to kids in a very high quality pace, not in a low quality pace. So please, if you're doing school teaching, don't have 30 students in your computer science class. Do 15, and hopefully we'll talk about this later.
Yeah.
But the last thing I'll say is I just won the James Irvine Leadership Award in California for being an innovator in computer science and helping young men of color rise to the top in the tech industry.
Congrats. Congratulations. That's awesome. So as you all can see, we have a very accomplished panel in their own rights. encourage you all to chat with them after the fact, after this, if you would like to, and their bios are also in the program if you're curious at all. But getting right into it, our first question, what are the barriers for young people in leveraging technology for college access or learning in general? I'll repeat it one more time. What are the barriers for young people in leveraging technology for college access or learning in general?
I think what Oscar mentioned is critical. That is the infrastructure. I think schools, the mentality in schools, in colleges and universities. I'm not going to just talk about the K through 12 sector. I want to extend it to community colleges and four-year institutions. I think the mentality is that technology is a distractor, that technology should be avoided in some cases, that technology is creating all these monsters, right? So we have a lot of deficit mentality about what technology can do. And I'm not saying that we should not be worried about certain aspects of technology, but I feel this fear of educators and administrators about what technology could do in their classrooms, particularly for low-income, marginalized communities. It feels to me that they don't have a framework to operate and to understand what technology can do to empower people, particularly marginalized people. So I think I don't think it's necessarily about the students. We like to put the onus on the students and the families and the communities as to what are they lacking and I think it's the structures that don't allow them to use some of the technology in productive. And like I said, I try to be critical. I'm not saying all technology is good and is the panacea to all problems in education, but I do feel a lot of fear among educators and administrators. Just going to say that.
So I think for me, one of the biggest barriers is the generational divide. And what I mean by that is the rate at which technology is constantly changing and moving. Often for us as practitioners, also in terms of age difference, we are always less familiar with what the latest thing often is. And I think this is something that we even cited in our project in terms of me coming aboard and our generational differences of understanding which technologies were sort of the innovators, and then us talking with students and then them also telling us, oh, well, we're not using this technology in this way anymore. There's this whole other platform. And it's like, well, we just got all this money, and so we're gonna have to, right? We're gonna have to use Facebook. I'm sorry. And so I think that that's often the barriers, right? Is that many of us engaging in either the study of technology or using technology can often be very far behind where our students are because they're engaging with it every day, especially in the mobile space. And so I think that that can be a barrier to when we have sort of built-in assumptions about which technologies we should be using to accomplish things, rather than focusing on systems or processes that can be replicated within the technologies that students are using. And so I think that that's an important piece of understanding what the utilities can be of different technologies, how you can replicate similar processes across different platforms and mediums, that we can, again, meet students where they are instead of sort of going where we thought they were going to be, and the needle has moved and they've moved on, and then they become disinterested.
I think one of the biggest issues is teacher education. I think when I came into teaching high school, I taught it for a few years, maybe 4 years. I was teaching, like Oscar said, Word. They wanted me to teach Word, right? And then I became a coach, and I saw that a lot of teachers didn't have access to the pedagogy of teaching computer science, how it's supposed to be taught. They didn't know what computer science was, right? I don't know how many times I had teachers or parents come to me and say, oh, my student plays on, he's always on the computer. So I think he'd be really good at computer science, right? And while that's great, there's this quote from computer science, which is, the study of computer science is as much about computers as astronomy is about telescopes, right? And a lot of teachers don't know that, right? That really computer science, giving students access to being a computer scientist, is really about thinking processes, right? And those are the things that we need to push. And curriculum and technology is great, but there's a lot of times we have technology-rich schools, but curriculum poor. And a lot of that can be alleviated with teacher education, and I'll talk about that more and more and more.
For us, just to give a story in terms of barriers, I think I mentioned it earlier. I think one of the barriers for schools that I've seen. And by the way, just so you know my background, I consulted as an educational consultant for 15 years. So I'm coming from a place where I research tools and I tested tools and platforms for schools. I used to consult and still do sometimes with the Reardon Foundation. And I always believe that they are the best in terms of data for technology access tools. And we were able to go look at schools and really understand what schools were using. And the barrier that I found with schools is that most of the times we follow trends. And I keep saying we follow trends. With schools, we follow what's hot right now. If somebody's a buzzword out there and saying, oh, use, for example, this is a very good example, use tablets. Tablets are the answer. Digital access, tablets. And it takes as simple as for us to do a survey with 100 parents and ask the parents, hey, do you guys want tablets? And the parents answering back saying, no, I can buy tablets on my own. But the trend shows that minorities, in order for us to give access to minorities or college access or to parents of low-income students, is to give them a tablet. But it's as simple as 3 or 4 hours to do research on 100 parents and ask them, do you need tablets? And they will tell us, and they told us, and say, we don't want tablets. We actually want a computer, an actual computer that works at my house. And let me tell you what we found through that research. We found that 100 parents told us that in their house, or at least 80% of them in their house, only had one laptop. That's one laptop for about 6 people in the house. So that means when my dad is paying for the bills, my 2 sisters and myself, I don't have college access. I don't have a computer to do it. So the barrier is the trends that are happening. The barrier is that we get so much into the trends, into the tablets. Right now, the trends computer science and STEM. And by the way, I'm a computer science advocate since like when I went to school about 20 years ago. But it's a trend. We have to look at the quality of the programs and the quality of the tools that we're giving our students, especially in low-income communities. If we're going to do computer science one day at your schools, because that is the trend, that is what people are telling us, let's do it with 15 students, right? Back in the 70s and the 80s, we talked about math being on the trend, and we got to get all these minorities into math. How many mathematicians do we have now? So what I'm saying is this, let's not follow trends. Let's look at the barriers and see, if you're going to bring a tool into your classrooms and into your nonprofit organization, have the youth test it for you for a month. As simple as that. See if they like it. If they don't like it, throw it away. Next product. That's what I say. Do not follow trends.
And I want to add to that for the tech world, which I had the opportunity to collaborate with the creators of the Schools app and now the text messaging software company that is paying for our research, is we need to really, right now in the cell phones, right? It's not tablets, but now it's cell phones. Families, again, talking to families, and talking to students, we realize students are sharing their phones. You had a video about paying for data plans. It's not about data plans. The students are like, okay, I'm texting you, but she told me, well, my mom is the one that uses the phone now, so she emails me. I mean, they have these very complex mechanisms of communication instead of using technology. Sometimes the tech companies don't understand that. So it's so important, like you said, talk to the people who is going to use it, because if we don't know how to communicate the value of our product to the people who are going to use it, they're going to, in a week, get rid of it.
And I would say, like, in terms of mobile phones, you will see a lot of companies nowadays saying that kids are using mobile phones and that their platforms should be on mobile. That is true. They're not wrong. Kids are using mobile phones. That is the truth. Minority kids, black and brown kids are using mobile phones. The question really that we need to ask is, are they using their phones to apply for jobs and are using their phones to apply for college?
Definitely.
Most platforms out there right now, they're still in the 19th or the 20th century. That means that their websites are not mobile friendly. So when the kids have a phone, even my phone X that I have, and I go on this phone and try to apply for something online or the college application, it doesn't work. Yeah. So you're going to disengage students because college access on digital phone is not there yet. So we have to look at the real research and not at the trends that people are saying to us, because I love corporations. They love me. Google loves me, by the way. So I'm just giving you the research that we have.
Thank you. So yeah, we heard a lot there, but again, thinking about trends, generational divides, and And one of the things I think that I'm getting from that is that, do the research, right? Ask people. And one of the things that I'm a big proponent of is this whole like divide we have between scholars and practitioners, or researchers and practitioners. We should be both, right? And we're all researchers. And I think, like Oscar kind of mentioned, it's as easy as kind of doing a survey or listening, right? So yeah, thank you all for that. The next question I want to ask is, what is something about technology or digital media in relation to education that you wish more people knew? What is something about technology or digital media in relation to education that you wish more people knew?
So I would say, piggybacking on what I said first, is that using a computer isn't being good at computer science. Yeah. As a computer scientist, I teach programming every day. I taught it yesterday. There are a lot of students that program, and they think that that's the active ingredient, right? And a lot of schools think that, oh, let me just put a programming class in, and that's enough. And we've tried that, and we did that for a number of years. We had a computer science A exam and AB exam, and 20,000 students all across the nation took it, right? And they were of certain demographics, and not demographics reflecting of me or a lot of my students. And then there was this reorganization where the College Board and NSF all looked at what do we really want to be teaching, and how can we give access to those students that aren't taking this exam. And they created a whole new course, Computer Science Principles, which is to give students access to computer science critical thinking skills. And that is what I would like students and parents and people to know, that is what computer science is about. One of my most powerful moments as a teacher is when I was helping a girl with a little Scratch project, which is you have an icon and it moves across the screen. And she was asking me, how do I get this to happen? And I used good teaching practices. So I used inquiry. So I asked her, oh, so how do you think, what category do you think you might look? And she picked, oh, this category and this other category, and oh, I think I'll do this. And then she thanked me at the very end. And I said, oh, did I actually help you? And she laughed and she said, no, you didn't help me. Right? and then that was the last question she ever asked me. And at the very end, she had this great project. Now, I look at that student, and in that moment, she became a computer scientist. She only knew Scratch, which is this basic programming language. But she's more advanced than some of the people taking my advanced C++ class, right? Because she knows how to answer her own questions. Wow. Right? So that's the one thing I would like people to know, is that that's what computer science is. I can teach it. It's much better to teach it with a computer, right? But I can start teaching those practices even without a computer. Yeah.
Awesome. So to build on that, I think one of the things that's important for me is that we don't have this built-in assumption that because technology is native to a particular generation, that means all of them are savvy in their use of technology, right? That it's actually a skill and a competency that gets built over time. And I think we see a lot of that, especially on the research side, that sort of says, oh, they're digital natives, so just put it online and it'll work. And it doesn't say, the extent to which folks will know how to navigate specific technologies, or if their use of those technologies is not what we would consider educationally purposeful, right? And so I think that that's an important distinction, that we don't want to just assume that because it's something that people have grown up with, right? And we can think about, generationally growing up with a VCR, for example, but being able to dub tapes, right, which is basically making a copy that you're not supposed to do, but I don't think we have this problem anymore, right? The savviness to dub a tape so that, your aunt or your uncle could have a copy of the Super Bowl or whatever the case is, right? There's a certain savvy that had to go into figuring that out, into doing that, and everybody that had a VCR didn't think that was a possibility, right? So I use that as a sort of an analog, but again, let's not just assume that because it's something germane to a generation that all of them know how to use it equally.
And I think I will always say that technology is not the substitute to several big issues in education we have. That was one of the messages that we wanted to send with our Gates study, that severely underfunded schools, that there's a lot of issues that technology by itself will not be able to solve. So let's not also pretend that technology is going to solve everything. One of the things that perplexes me the most as a researcher is exactly what Charles is saying. The biggest evidence in terms of college access, one of the biggest, most cited evidence, random experiment, right, is the FAFSA experiment, right, conducted by our colleagues at Stanford, the economist, Eric Bettinger leading that effort, that they basically found that one of the most promising ways to increase college access is to help parents sit down face-to-face, fill out the FAFSA. But we've forgotten about that as well. So I think there is a role technology can play, but it's no substitute for severe problems we have in our education system.
Yeah, I have two things to what that we need to know. One is a TXT plug, so here it goes. Sorry for the plug. I'm excited to say and announce to this group that in South Central Los Angeles, by hopefully May, and I say May because it all depends on the city, by May you'll have your first tech hub in South Central LA. So we're partnering with the city of LA, we're partnering with the mayor, and the city council member, Curran Price. Give them, that's the mayor and Curran Price. We're partnering with them, and they're gonna provide us an 8,000 square footage building where you are gonna be welcome to come and take training classes for how to teach computer science, training classes on how to do drones, artificial intelligence. Teachers gonna be welcome into the center. We're going to be the tech hub for your schools or your nonprofits to do a field trip into our center and play around with all this cool technology, whether it's artificial intelligence, whether it's blockchain, or any of the latest technologies that's happening. So we're excited to announce that because I think the community needs to know that South Central LA has a tech hub, it has a center. We're the first hacker space in South Central LA, and we want to enhance it and open it up to the community. That's one. The second thing I want people to know, and this is close to my heart, very close to my heart, why TXT got started. 1996, I graduated high school. I told you my age, right? In 1996, the computer science class at Jordan High School was really a typing class. That's all it was. In 2011, it's still the case. Or 2018, still the case. But the most alarming issue that Jordan High School in 2018, tons of the schools in South Central LA have now, is that we're forgetting our young black boys. That we're forgetting that our young black men need to be part of this digital revolution. And that we're forgetting that our Latino boys are also going to jail and are also dropping out of high school. And that we're forgetting that they exist, and that 10 years from now, or 20 years from now, we're gonna look back and say, whoa, why are there so many homeless and more black men in jail, and why are there so many Latino boys in jail, and why are they poor and broke in the streets? Because in 2018, we didn't think of them as digital revolutionaries. We didn't think of them as part of this digital era. Yes, we gotta have an emphasis on women in STEM. I agree to that. I'm a big proponent, my entire board is women, so I agree with that. My bosses are women. However, the reality is that in the tech industry, it's white men who are dominating. It is not our black and brown boys. It's not our black and brown sisters. It is white men. So the reality is I can't go through this conversation and say, you have to pay attention to that. The data from, so you can help me, the data that they collected at CCF or Madison, you can help me with who the people who did the research. It shows the academically inclined programs that we have for young people. Only 30% are young boys that are involved academically, that are involved in schools, that are involved digitally. 30%, right? And we're not paying attention, we're not advocating for them. So I say, don't forget our young boys, please. Don't forget that there are people dying in Watts right now as we speak. There are young boys getting shot. There are young boys picking up trash just to survive every day. So that's what I want to say.
Thank you for that. All right. I don't think it's working. Okay, so I'm good. So I think we've heard a lot about some of the barriers to access, college access, and obstacles that we have. I want to hear somewhat like what are things we can do to kind of facilitate access, and more specifically, how do we capitalize on what young people bring to the table? So how do we capitalize on what young people bring to the table in order to kind of like, start to make some change, whether it be tech or college access, what have you?
I think since Oscar mentioned that we've left them out of the conversation, that the first thing we need to do is document exactly how they use technology and the resources and the knowledge that they're bringing into how they're using apps, text messages, phones, tablets, that we just don't know because we've not asked them. We need to go document to communities and families. We need to do that as researchers and as practitioners. That's, I think, the first thing we need to do, because otherwise we'll be assuming what they're doing. We'll be assuming that they're using this and now they're somewhere else and that they're sharing phones. And the only way you can do this, bringing their knowledge, is to first document the varied sources of knowledge and wealth and the variety different of ways. There are very cool ways in which they are using technology. So smart, it's so strategic that we don't even know of. But for me, the first step is just going and talking to people, the people that have been left behind and ignored in this conversation.
I think one of the salient ways that we see young people using technology, and this isn't just in the social change space, right, but that so many of them are engaged in what we consider participatory journalism, right, that many of them are documenting their everyday lives, they're documenting things that are happening in schools, or things that are happening in classrooms, right, and they're putting these things on the internet, whether it's through Snapchat or through live tweeting or, live from Periscope or whatever the thing is now. And so I think that we need to use that as an opportunity to cultivate and develop different types of skills and see how they're transferable. For me, it's been really interesting to see how that skill set, even for graduate students with whom I work, also becomes a research method, right? And so when we have simple exercises of doing, observations or reflection exercises, that they can actually take the devices they already have with them, be able to take pictures, take notes, do audio memos. And I think things like that are always happening with young people in school. So then how do we say, given your already intellectual curiosity about discovery, right, or about documentation, if that's something that's already there, how do we build upon that, right, and recognize that that is a strength, something that is normal for them to do and something that they're engaged in, and then find ways to make that transferable to other things that could be happening, right? And it could be even the college access or the college journey, right? We at USCC and probably at UCLA as well, right? Over the summer, there's tons of black and brown kids just all over campus that are doing some sort of pre-college program or getting some sort of enrichment activity and exercises. How do we mine all the different selfies and Snapchats that they're posting, right, to create a sort of digital narrative that they can then help share with their other peers who maybe couldn't make it at that particular point, to amp up recruiting, right? All of this stuff is right there and it's happening, but often we don't recognize that as a strength. We say, oh, they're distracted, or they're doing it for the gram, and it's like, well, if college access is doing it for the gram, then I'm here for it, right? And so we have to value that. We have to use that in a way that really is meeting students where they are and allowing them to do sort of peer-to-peer pedagogies, right, and peer-to-peer college access work that sometimes we as adults or the experts don't always see as something that's valuable, but it's really, really important.
I always say going, in terms of being learners, I think they are learners on their own. There's a lot of digital learners out there. There are young people, and one of the signs that we've learned, at least at TXT, and how to keep up with the technology and how to bring them into the table, it's we look for that one kid, or we just pay real close attention to that kid that is reading Mashable instead of doing homework, and they're reading TechCrunch instead of reading their history book. And let me give you an example. We have Jesse Garcia, and maybe he's on Twitter, he'll respond back. But Jesse Garcia right now is at Humboldt University. We got Jesse when he was in the 9th grade, and Jesse had a 2.0 GPA. And Jesse was the one who was being dismissed from schools and said he's not going to go to college, so let's put tons of resources into a high-achieving, low-income student. So Jesse's 2.0 GPA didn't care much about school, but he loved TechCrunch. He loved TechCrunch. He can tell you every company that had gone IPO. He can tell you, he can tell you a company who got an IPO. He can tell you the latest trends in AI, the latest trends in drones, cryptocurrency. He brought in a cryptocurrency speaker into TXT, and he got some Bitcoin, so he's probably rich now. But the point is this. 3 years ago, we were asking them and saying, hey, so how do we stay ahead of the curve? What do we do? How do we engage the students? And Jesse was the one who said, hey, use Slack. And we were like, what is Slack? How do we use Slack? And he said, move away from Moodle at the time, or whatever we had. Yammer, we had Yammer at the time. He said, move away from Yammer. Nobody cares about Yammer. Go, hopefully Microsoft didn't hear that. But he said, move into Slack. Slack is what we're using. Slack is cool. You can text me with Slack. So we listened to him. We brought him in. He told about Slack 3 years ago. Now we have software, in-house software developed by an 18-year-old that text kits, and we have software, and we measure data, and we collect data, and all goes to Slack, and Slack brings it back, and we analyze all this data very seamlessly, right? Because that 18-year-old, now he's 18 or 19, told us that we should use Slack. So I think it's just listening to them and just really taking a risk on them, that they do know what they're talking about when it comes to technology.
Great. I think one thing, going back to access, is the way that we utilize what students can offer is by giving them a seat at the table. And a lot of times they don't even have that. At a school that I know of, I meant not to do that. At a school, there are some schools that have prerequisites on computer science classes, math, right? And what that winds up doing is that winds up discouraging certain types of students, students that look like me, that are underrepresented in computer science, from even being in the class. So they're not even part of the conversation, right? And there are policy changes that we can make that sometimes people don't have a vested interest in making, right? I can talk to some people that, and I understand their argument of, oh, students are more likely to succeed if they have a certain amount. Well, we can just put Calc 2 as the prerequisite, right? But we want to have access to everyone. So a lot of students aren't even getting to the point of saying that computer science is something that I can actually have a voice in and that I can actually participate in.
So how are we doing on time?
14 minutes.
14 minutes, cool. I'll ask maybe one more question, and if we have time, open up to the audience. That's okay. And then you mentioned, Solomon, that you said a couple times there are students who look like me, and Oscar, you're talking about black and brown youth very often. What does identity have to do with the intersection of college access and technology?
Well, I think the students have gotten messages, very clear messages, that people like them don't belong in certain spaces, and they start to believe that. Unfortunately, that's the case, right? Exactly what you were just mentioning, like prerequisite, instead of, again, this is not a technology issue, these are structural issues of, let's get rid of these prerequisites, but support students. No one is saying that they don't need support and that they're academically ready. But we need to rethink, because if they don't see themselves the same, white men are leading these conversations, they're leading the products, they're leading the investments, if they don't see themselves there, then they're never going to feel you can be that. I mean, we need just to remind ourselves of when we heard someone that spoke like me, that are like, okay, that person has a weird accent, maybe I can make it. I mean, we all, if we think of our own experiences, there's a moment in our lives where if we saw somebody like us, in academia in my case, I said, maybe it's not that bad, I can maybe make it there. The same, we've left them out of important conversations, of spaces. We're constantly reminding them, you don't belong here. Your identity doesn't matter. Or it matters because you can be here. So I think that's the important, that we need to change these messages. We need to really, really work hard on including a lot of low income, and not only African American, Native Americans. I mean, there's so many marginalized groups of people that are left behind this conversation. So it's not just, I think, Latino and African American boys and men, it's girls, it's, like I said, Native American, it's people with disabilities, it's a whole nother group of marginalized groups that are being left behind.
For us, identity, so we package curriculum that we're sharing with schools, and we just launched our social enterprise in order to bring this curriculum to schools and do consulting in STEM learning and STEM training, specifically in computer science. Well, specifically at the intersection, which is really important how our curriculum was developed. We've been modifying it for 8 years, and now it's ready to go to the public. It took us that long because of the identity part. It's the intersection of entrepreneurship. So if you think about a Venn diagram, is the intersection of entrepreneurship, is the intersection of computer science, and the intersection of cultural competency. So we're right in the middle. Our curriculum does not have just computer science. I believe computer science is just a tool. It's a tool to get to think critically and hopefully help them be motivated with technology. But really, it's the leadership, the confidence building. It's really the ability to understand their own personal value in order for them to have personal value for companies when they go work at these technology companies. So the curriculum, in terms of cultural competency, one of the exercises we have in our curriculum is an exercise called Who Are You? So we ask the kids, who are you? And the kid answers back for a minute. And then we ask the kid, who do you pretend to be? And then he answers back for a minute. And then the last question that we ask the kid, before we get to computer science, we ask, who do others think you are, right? So we go through that process and we incorporate it in computer science, and we incorporate in how they use computer science to be positive models for themselves and have that great value. So when they go one day, and by the way, now we have, out of 100 kids that go through our summer program, 70 of them are going to computer science major. We have the largest university of minorities from South Central LA or anywhere in computer science. We do. And with the beauty of it, the research that we have now, the data that we collected, is that because we do cultural competency, and we do ask about their own identity, they're very prideful who they are at UC Davis, at UC Irvine, at Humboldt, at Stanford, at Hobart and Williams, at Syracuse. Not only are they helping middle class and wealthy students get tutored in computer science, not only are they the ones tutoring, but they're also skipping Java 101 or the intro to Java at their universities. But it's because we built confidence in them. It's about confidence building first. It's about their own value system, about them understanding that they're powerful within themselves. And then computer science cake. Computer science is not that hard, but you have to have that confidence in yourself first.
I think identity, computer science, digital, and college access is a really interesting problem, really, in computer science. I think the culture is not great for people that aren't Asian, white, and males generally. I remember when I went into grad school at UCLA, I remember standing up in the lecture hall and looking around for another nappy head. And I didn't see anybody, right? The message that I got was, well, what am I doing here? And I taught at UCLA this past summer, and I was the only person of color. Well, I was the only black person. I was the instructor. And I think really we need to start having those conversations, and those need to be, like Oscar's saying, part of the curriculum, right? We have to, and we have to have that conversation not just with us, but with everybody. So when next time I walk into a class and I'm the only person, to have a point of wow, this is interesting. Let's have a conversation, a short conversation of what are the factors that brought us here, and what are some of the reasons why this classroom isn't more representative. And I think that's a first step by making people conscious of what's happening.
So the only thing that I'll add, I think, is when we think about identity, I think it really does center on these three questions that were just mentioned of who am I, who do I pretend to be, and who do people believe me to be. And I think what digital technology has afforded us is really this sort of voyeuristic interaction with people in an everyday way, right? And so when we think about young people and the ways that not only are they sort of performing in these digital spaces, but really capturing themselves through various developmental stages, right, is really an interesting opportunity to see how students are being and becoming who it is that they are. And at this point, right, we have those who have grown up with these technologies where they have a digital footprint that starts at the very beginning, right? It may even start, for those of us that have families, right, and have children, that digital footprint starts almost as soon as they're born. And so it's interesting to look at that to help them understand who they are, but also for us to understand who our students are. And I find this particularly interesting as, someone who teaches and then works with students, that they'll follow me on social media and then I follow them on social media, and you get just a very different understanding or perception, right? The full picture, especially because so much of the teacher-student dynamic is sort of a performance, right? And it's one that has to maintain these superficial understandings of integrity, right, without the authenticity. And so I think that that's really a barrier that we have to sort of break down that says, how do we reveal ourselves? How do we engage in vulnerability? How do we use the digital space to do that? Because for any instructor that knows this, right, like the relationship is what really drives learning in the classroom, in any classroom. And so if there's a way to break down that wall and you can expose yourself, you can be and share a sense of vulnerability with your students in this way rather than feeling this has to be private and restricted, right, then we can make, I think, a lot of inroads in not only computer science, but a variety of other subjects when we center the identity in the self.
Thank you. We have 5 minutes left. I have more questions, but if anyone has like a question they want to ask the panel, see Rios' hand.
Yes. So, Field 5, Central Black Cultural Institute Affairs at USC. I have a question just generally about how does a nonprofit organization or a school go about setting up a digital game plan, how this stuff is going to work. So I think about something Oscar said in terms of if a tool doesn't work, throw it out and try something new. Or I've been at organizations where you build up, and now we got a grant, and like you spend this grant money, and it's like we got waterproof iPads, and we're going to use them. But then you get them, and what you thought was going to happen doesn't work. So now you're back to square one in terms of like, okay, we have all these tablets, what do we do with them? And like, what's the next step? So you can't just throw them away. We need to maybe use them. So like, what type of partnerships do you need, or what type of game plan strategies do you need to be successful in this space?
Well, real quick, I think finding a champion in whatever area that you want to go into. So if you have a school that you're trying to partner with, or organization, having someone in that organization that you have a direct connection with. I've seen a lot of things fall apart because there hasn't been someone there. And then you hopefully can grow that person and grow understanding in that organization.
I was going to share with you that when we did the case study, the app was intended to increase the social interaction of community college. That never happened. Students were using it to exchange and sell textbooks because they needed the money, and to navigate financial aid and procedural college issues. So we took this opportunity then to move the study completely to a financial aid study, and to really understand. And the college, again, there was a champion who understood that while it was not being used as intended, it created this window of opportunity to get to know more about even the use of apps in general. So I would say just not be open, that sometimes the students will take you to places because, again, we let them use it for whatever they needed it. We never told them what to do with it. Intentionally, the app was sold to improve engagement, and students are like, I'm busy, I don't need friends. I need to tell my textbook. So connect me with others, or I need a job. Help me connect with others to get a job or an internship or a class, or. So be open, I would say.
So when we do consultants for schools, and if anybody wants our services, we have a table back there. But when we do consultants with schools, we go into schools and nonprofits, and we do what we call a digital fitness plan. So that's the first step that we actually go in there with. We create a digital fitness plan. We understand your company. We understand what is it where you want to go, and not only where you want to go, but where are you at now. It's very important to know. It's just like me losing weight, which I've been trying to do for a long time. But it's just an understanding where I'm at now. Like where's my health wise right now, and then how much do I want to achieve into the future, and understanding that digital fitness that you have, and then from there accessing tools. But the other component to that, what I recommend schools and nonprofits is understanding the philanthropic world and understanding who are those philanthropic individuals or those foundations that are risk averse. They like to take risk. So you go to them with a plan, and you actually put together a plan, and you understand which tool you're going to use, and then You collect data on that too, and then you give it back to them, and you pivot as long as they let you pivot. So I think that's very important, because for us, thankfully, we had people like the Durfee Foundation, Zero Divide back in the days. We had the Reardon Foundation, which is great, the Reardon Foundation, and now the James Irvine Foundation, which they taking lots of risk on new innovative ways of doing things. So look for that. Ask your foundations who takes that risk.
Thank you so much. And can we just give our panelists a hand?